We went through the B Corp thing a number of years ago. Very, very proud of what we try and do here, which is difficult for a manufacturing company, and things like that. But again, is it buzzy, or are people really, really taking the sustainability thing seriously, or is it ticking a box? Is it we're not going to hit our net zero targets? I think I'm trying to reinvest in an electric car at the moment, and annoyed that they're putting tariffs on and taking away all my nice benefits that were in place 3 years ago when I switched to electric, as my example. But yeah, welcome your thoughts.
Again, we talked earlier about, well, I mentioned how I thought it was unhelpful giving labels like defence. I think it's unhelpful giving a label of sustainability in that it's used in so many different ways by different people these days. That the purpose of a business is to satisfy a need, and in satisfying a need, the business makes money. So if you talk about a sustainable business, that's what a business needs to be sustainable. Now, a lot of people are interpreting sustainability as being simply an environmental word.
Yes.
And I think, that's quite dangerous, because you can be the cleanest, most environmentally sound company and fail to make money. That suddenly is not a sustainable business.
But then you're in trouble.
So let's be really, really careful how we deal with it. Of course, it's important, and I touched on earlier about the idea of being a nation based in manufacturing around remake and reprocessing. That will significantly reduce the carbon impact of activity around manufacturing. Working with primary materials is always a high consumer of energy. High consumer of energy means large carbon footprint.
Yeah.
The companies and the companies engaged with government have certain compliance issues, and this is where your B Corp comes from. I think it helps you in that field. If you are a smaller company, you may see some effects of that, but you're way down the supply chain. So yes, you are making a contribution to the CO2, if you like, or the booked emissions against a component or a process. But sometimes that's taken into account, sometimes it isn't. Most companies have an environmental policy, or at least are leaning towards environmental behaviours. There are certain ISO standards, 14001, around emissions, around effluent, etc. It's just good practice in manufacturing companies to adopt these basic principles. Whatever's going off your site is either a product or a waste. And that waste can be in packaging, the waste can be in liquids, it can be in solids. And the better you are at managing that, the more effective you are financially. Because it costs money to get rid of stuff. Now, equally, if that stuff is high value, and going right back to the beginning of our conversation, we ought to be keeping high value materials, reprocessing high value materials. So the way you store them once you generate them, it could be swarf from a machining operation. Instead of having one swarf bin, one for each type of metal, is a much better way to manage what's going off your site, because you can then sell that for a significantly large amount of money for it to be reprocessed and back into manufacturing companies in this country. So I'm sorry to rant on about it, but
no, absolutely, no, not at all.
I do think it's terminology that gets adopted and it comes into mainstream, and to simplify it, people use it as a label. I think it's just good practice for all manufacturing companies to do as well as they can, and to the best of their ability, to use the minimum amount of energy, the minimum amount of materials, and where you generate waste, manage that waste in the most effective way possible.
Yeah, I did a couple of points. We our purchasing team here always look for companies with 14,001. And it's a policy. It's a management system, but it just means they are conscious of it. We're working towards our 14,001. A bit slower than I'd like here, but we are policy. But it means companies are taking it into mind, and how they can, recirculate everything like that. I sit on a couple of awards as a panel member and mentor, and one of them is Just Imagine If, and it's all about sustainability. And it's amazing what some companies are doing. A lot of the applicants are from Africa and things like that. What some companies and people are trying to do with the offcuts of what most people traditionally would call waste,
Yeah.
and trying to recirculate that back into the supply chain and things. And it's thinking outside the box. It's making a little bit of effort of somebody must need this rather than just throwing it in the bin. Is there a way to store it and get it back into the supply chain, and taking a little bit of effort around that? But as you say, it all depends on, there's no point in doing that if the company's going to go down the pan because you're concentrating too much on your
But the future can be bright, Nigel. A lot of companies are in good shape financially to
yeah.
move forwards, and all we need is a little bit of stability, a little bit of positivity, and I think the future of UK manufacturing can be very, very good indeed, very healthy. New sectors, new technologies, new materials. If we really, really quickly get onto this and adopt the leadership in terms of reprocessing and reworking with high value materials, I
Mm.
think there's a significant gain to be had right there.